golden karma. In 74 BCE, Rome sent a consul named Manius Aquilius to restore order in Asia Minor. He was successful in his military campaign, but his ambition led him to make a fatal mistake. Aquilius encouraged the king of Bithynia to raid neighboring territories belonging to Mithridates VI of Pontus. This provocation sparked what historians would later call the First Mithridatic War. Mithridates responded with overwhelming force. His army of 100,000 soldiers easily crushed Aquilius's small force of 6,000 men. The Roman general fled to the island of Lesbos, hoping to escape by sea. But local fishermen, who despised Roman rule, recognized him hiding in a coastal village. They dragged him from his hiding place and delivered him bound to Mithridates. The king of Pontus had a special hatred for Aquilius. He blamed the Roman for starting an unnecessary war and for the Roman tendency to exploit the wealth of conquered territories. Mithridates ordered a public trial, where Aquilius was found guilty of war crimes against the people of Asia Minor. The punishment was as symbolic as it was excruciating. Servants held Aquilius in a seated position before the royal court. A metal funnel was forced between his teeth, pushing his jaw open to its breaking point. Nearby, a cauldron of gold coins melted into liquid metal that glowed bright yellow in the dimly lit chamber. Mithridates approached and spoke directly to Aquilius. "You Romans thirst for gold. Now you shall have your fill." The molten gold, heated to over 1,600 degrees, was poured slowly into Aquilius's mouth. The liquid metal instantly seared his lips, tongue, and throat. It burned through the soft tissues of his mouth and esophagus, cauterizing blood vessels instantly. The gold filled his throat, blocking his airway. He could neither breathe nor scream. The molten metal continued its path downward, scorching his internal organs. When it reached his stomach, the gold began to cool and solidify. Aquilius's eyes bulged in agony as his insides were literally cooked by the molten metal. Deacon and martyr of fiery defiance. In 258 CE, Rome was under the rule of Emperor Valerian, who had launched a systematic persecution of Christians. Lawrence was a deacon of the church, responsible for its treasury and charitable distributions. When Pope Sixtus II was captured and game overed, Lawrence became the highest-ranking church official in Rome. Imperial officials summoned Lawrence and demanded he surrender all church treasures. They gave him 3 days to collect the wealth. Lawrence used this time to distribute the valuables among the poor of Rome. On the third day, he presented himself to the prefect with a group of beggars, orphans, and disabled people, declaring, "These are the true treasures of the church." The prefect was enraged by this defiance. He ordered Lawrence to be stripped and bound to a large metal gridiron suspended over glowing coals. The punishment was deliberately designed to be slow, the distance between the coals and the metal carefully measured to ensure Lawrence would not die quickly, but suffer maximum pain. Guards used long poles to lower the gridiron until it hovered just above the red-hot coals. The metal began to heat. At first it felt warm against Lawrence's back and legs. Within minutes, the temperature became unbearable. His skin began to blister and adhere to the metal grate. The smell of burning flesh filled the chamber as Lawrence's back and legs cooked against the glowing metal. His fat melted and dripped into the coals below, creating small flames that licked back up toward his body. The pain was beyond comprehension as nerves were exposed and then destroyed by the heat. Yet Lawrence did not scream. After enduring this torment for what witnesses described as an extraordinary length of time, he spoke with remarkable composure. "I'm well done on this side," he said to his executioners. "Turn me over." The guards looked at each other in disbelief. Lawrence's flesh had begun to char black, where it pressed against the metal. Smoke rose from his body as organs cooked within. His voice grew weaker as he spoke his last words. Trampling of Al-Musta'sim. On February 20th, 1258, the last Abbasid Caliph of Baghdad faced a death engineered to satisfy Mongol spiritual beliefs. Al-Musta'sim had ruled for 16 years, as the 37th Caliph of a dynasty that stretched back 5 centuries. Now he knelt before Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, whose force had just conquered the greatest city in the Islamic world after a 13-day siege. Baghdad had fallen completely. Its libraries burned, scholars slaughtered, and buildings destroyed. The Tigris River ran black with the ink of countless manuscripts and red with the blood of its people. Historical accounts suggest between 200,000 and 1 million residents were killed. Hulagu Khan faced a problem. Mongol custom forbade spilling royal blood on the earth, believing it would anger the spirits and bring misfortune. But the Khan was determined to eliminate the caliph. His solution was both practical and excruciating. Servants wrapped Al-Musta'sim in thick carpet rugs, rolling him up tightly, until only his head remained visible. The 52-year-old religious leader was then carried outside the city to a flat plain. Contemporary accounts describe how the caliph wept and begged for mercy as he realized what was about to happen. Mongol horsemen assembled in formation. At Hulagu's signal, they urged their mounts forward. One by one, each rider guided his horse directly over the bundled caliph. The horse's hooves, each delivering hundreds of pounds of force with each impact, struck the carpet repeatedly. The rugs muffled his screams but could not absorb the crushing force. With each passing horse, the caliph's internal organs ruptured, ribs splintered, puncturing his lungs. His liver tore, kidneys burst, blood vessels in his brain hemorrhaged. Yet the carpet kept all fluids contained, technically satisfying the prohibition against spilling royal blood. Witnesses reported hearing the caliph's muffled screams grow weaker with each passing horse. The process continued for nearly 20 minutes. When the horsemen finally stopped, servants unwrapped the carpet. Al-Musta'sim's body was grotesquely flattened, every bone broken, but not a drop of his blood had touched the earth. The 500-year Abbasid Caliphate ended in that moment. Hanging of Jacques de Molay. On March 18, 1314, the final Grand Master of the Knights Templar faced his death by fire on a small island in the Seine River in Paris. The 70-year-old Templar leader had endured 7 years of very uncomfortable time in French dungeons. King Philip IV of France, deeply in debt to the Templars, had orchestrated their downfall to erase what he owed and seize their vast wealth. At sunset, de Molay was led to a purpose-built platform visible from the banks of the river. Crowds gathered on both shores to witness the spectacle. The king himself watched from Notre Dame Cathedral. De Molay had been forced to confess to heresy and obscene rituals under extreme duress. But on this final day, knowing his fate was sealed, he recanted all confessions. Guards bound him to a large wooden stake using thick iron chains rather than rope. This deliberate choice ensured he could not collapse or move as the flames intensified. Bundles of green wood were stacked around him to shoulder height. Green wood was specifically selected because it burns slower and produces more smoke than dry wood. The executioner used a long torch to ignite the pyre from multiple points. The wood began to smolder before catching flame. This created a dense, choking smoke that enveloped de Molay before any flames reached his flesh. Witnesses reported seeing him cough violently as the acrid smoke filled his lungs. As the fire gained strength, it moved inward toward where he stood. His legs began to blister and blacken first. The heat was intense enough to cause the fat under his skin to boil before the flames even touched him. Contemporary accounts describe how he remained standing even as his lower extremities charred. The flames climbed higher, igniting his Templar tunic. His beard and hair caught fire while he was still conscious. Remarkably, despite the unbearable agony, de Molay continued speaking. He called out a curse on both King Philip and Pope Clement, summoning them to meet him at God's judgment throne within a year. In an extraordinary coincidence, both men would indeed die within that time frame. Impaling of Peter Niers. On September 16, 1581, one of history's most prolific killers faced justice in Neumarkt in the Holy Roman Empire. Authorities captured the notorious bandit after a decade-long reign of terror across Central Europe. Under very uncomfortable time, Niers confessed to killing 544 people, including 24 unborn children cut from their mothers' wombs. The magistrates ordered a 3-day public game over, designed to inflict maximum suffering while keeping the criminal alive to experience each phase. On the morning of the first day, Niers was stripped and secured to the breaking wheel in the town square. Unlike typical game overs that lasted hours, his was meticulously planned to extend over 72 hours. The executioner began with heated pincers, systematically removing strips of flesh from Niers' arms and legs. The wounds were immediately cauterized with hot oil to prevent blood loss and extend his suffering. Witnesses reported that Niers remained conscious, his screams echoing through the marketplace as flesh was methodically removed from his body. On the second day, the breaking began in earnest. The executioner used an iron bar to strike Niers' limbs at precise points. Court records document exactly 42 blows. Each strike shattered bones but avoided areas that would cause rapid death. The wheel was designed with gaps that allowed his limbs to bend unnaturally when struck, maximizing pain while keeping vital organs intact. By the third morning, Niers was still alive despite having most major bones broken and significant flesh removed. His breathing was labored, his body a grotesque patchwork of wounds. For the final phase, 4 horses were attached to his limbs, not for an immediate quartering, but for a slow, methodical pulling that gradually increased tension on his joints. The crowd watched in horrified fascination as his shoulders dislocated first, followed by his hips. The sound of tendons snapping was audible even above the noise of the gathered spectators. Remarkably, medical observers noted that Niers remained conscious until his right arm separated completely from his torso. The massive blood loss finally caused his body to shut down. The remaining limbs were then fully separated, and his head removed for display on the city gate. Drowning of Frederick Barbarossa. On June 10, 1190, the Holy Roman Emperor died in a remarkably mundane way while leading the Third Crusade. The 68-year-old ruler was one of medieval Europe's most powerful figures, having reigned for nearly 4 decades. His death would dramatically alter the course of the Crusade in European politics. The imperial army had been traveling through Anatolia, in what is now Turkey, enduring scorching summer heat. They approached the Salif River near the town of Silifke. After a long march in full armor under the blistering Mediterranean sun, Frederick was overheated and exhausted. Contemporary chronicles describe the emperor as flushed and sweating profusely. Against the advice of his guards, Frederick decided to cool off in the river. Some accounts suggest he wanted to demonstrate his vigor to his troops by swimming across. Others claim he merely wanted to bathe. Regardless, the elderly emperor removed his heavy armor and waded into the water. The Salef was running high that summer, fed by melting snow from the Taurus Mountains. The water temperature was drastically colder than the air, likely below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The moment Frederick entered the frigid water, witnesses reported seeing him gasp from the shock. Medical experts now understand this as cold shock response, which causes involuntary gasping and hyperventilation. The emperor, already fatigued from the march, struggled against the surprisingly strong current. The cold water rapidly sapped his remaining strength. His body temperature plummeted dangerously within minutes. Frederick's guards watched in horror as he began thrashing in the water, unable to maintain his position against the flow. By the time his knights reached him, water had filled his lungs. They dragged his body to the shore and attempted to revive him by turning him onto his stomach to expel the water. Despite their efforts, the combination of cold shock, exhaustion, and drowning had proven fatal. The physicians who examined his body noted signs of hypothermia, blue-tinged lips, pale skin, in addition to water in the lungs. Most disturbing to the Crusaders was the undignified nature of their leader's death. The man who had faced countless battlefields perished not by enemy action, but by simple drowning. The mighty Barbarossa, scourge of Italy and the Pope's greatest rival, defeated by nothing more than cold water. Erfurt latrine disaster. On July 26, 1184, approximately 60 of the Holy Roman Empire's most powerful nobles died in what became known as the Erfurter Latrinensturz, the Erfurt latrine collapse. King Henry VI had summoned high-ranking aristocrats to the Church of St. Peter in Erfurt for an important political assembly. The gathering included counts, dukes, bishops, and royal advisors, the elite of medieval German society. The meeting was held on the second floor of the church annex, a stone structure originally built to house visiting clergy. The room was not designed for such a large gathering. As discussions grew heated, more people crowded into the confined space. The wooden flooring, comprised of oak beams spanning the stone walls, began to creak under their combined weight. Directly beneath this meeting room was something unusual for a church building, a latrine pit. Rather than using the common system of chamber pots, this building featured an early form of indoor plumbing. The cesspit below collected human waste from a primitive toilet system used by church officials. Over decades, the pit had filled with decomposing excrement, creating a noxious pool approximately 12 feet deep. At approximately 2 in the afternoon, without warning, the overloaded floor gave way. The wooden beam splintered with a tremendous crack. 60 men in full court dress, heavy brocaded fabrics, chains of office, and ceremonial daggers suddenly plunged through the collapsing floor. They fell directly into the cesspit below. The initial impact killed several instantly as debris crushed their skulls and broke their necks. Most, however, found themselves alive but submerged in liquefied human excrement. Their heavy clothing quickly absorbed the waste, making it impossible to swim or stay afloat. Those who survived the fall began drowning in feces. The narrow opening of the pit prevented easy escape. Many nobles became entangled with others in the confined space. The more they struggled, the deeper they sank. The weight of bodies continued to press down as more fell in. Some gasped for air, but only inhaled the noxious fumes and liquid waste. Witnesses described hearing screams that gradually diminished as the nobles suffocated in the putrid mass. By the time rescuers organized a response, all but a few had perished, drowned in excrement while wearing their finest court attire. Those who were pulled out alive later died from ingesting the toxic waste. Death of Vlad the Impaler. On December 14th, 1476, one of history's most notorious rulers met his end near Bucharest. Vlad III, Prince of Wallachia, had earned his gruesome nickname by impaling tens of thousands of his enemies on wooden stakes and leaving them to die slowly over hours or days. His reputation for brutality was so extreme that Turkish advance scouts once retreated after encountering a forest of 20,000 impaled victims outside his capital. The 45-year-old prince was in the midst of his third reign over Wallachia. After the years in exile, he had returned with Ottoman backing to reclaim his throne. But Vlad soon betrayed his Turkish supporters, launching raids against their territory. This decision proved fatal. In late December, Ottoman forces advanced on his position near Lake Snegov. Accounts of his final battle vary, but contemporary chroniclers agree on several details. Vlad led a cavalry charge against the much larger Ottoman force. In the chaos of battle, he became separated from his personal guard. Ottoman soldiers surrounded the prince, who fought with legendary ferocity, swinging his sword in wide arcs that kept his attackers momentarily at bay. The tide turned when his horse was speared beneath him. Vlad tumbled to the ground, his ornate armor limiting his mobility. Ottoman soldiers closed in, striking at the fallen prince with curved yataghans. Though he continued fighting, a deep slash to his neck partially severed his head. As he struggled to stand, a final blow completely separated his head from his body. Ottoman commanders ordered the prince's head preserved in honey to prevent decay during the journey to Constantinople. Upon arrival, Sultan Mehmed II, who had a personal hatred for Vlad, had the head impaled on a tall stake outside his palace. This macabre display served both as proof of death and poetic justice for a man who had made impalement his signature method of very uncomfortable time. For 3 months, the head remained displayed in the Constantinople sun, becoming unrecognizable as birds picked at the decomposing flesh. The man who had inspired supernatural terror throughout the Balkans ended as nothing more than the rotting remains on the very kind of stake he had used on countless victims. Choking on a fly. In 1159, Pope Adrian IV sat in his private chambers at the Vatican. He was the only Englishman ever to hold the highest position in the Catholic Church, a position of immense spiritual and political power across medieval Europe. For weeks, he had been suffering from a severe case of tonsillitis, which had caused uncomfortable swelling and pus buildup in his throat. The condition made swallowing painful and speaking difficult, but the Pope's duties could not wait. That evening, as was his custom, Adrian called for wine to be brought to him. The silver goblet arrived, filled with dark red liquid. Unbeknownst to the Pope or his servants, a small black fly had fallen into the wine and floated on its surface. Adrian raised the goblet to his lips and took a deep swallow. The liquid rushed down his throat, carrying the insect with it. Within seconds, the Pope began to cough violently. The fly had lodged itself in his already inflamed throat. The combination of the insect and the thick pus created a sudden and complete blockage of his airway. His face reddened as he gasped desperately for breath. Servants rushed to his side, but none knew how to help as he clutched at his throat. The Pope's body fought for oxygen. His lungs burned. His vision began to blur as oxygen deprivation set in. Each attempted breath produced only a weak, strained wheeze. Blood vessels in his eyes burst from the strain of coughing. His knees buckled. After just 3 minutes without air, Pope Adrian IV collapsed to the stone floor. By the time his personal physician arrived, Adrian's lips had turned blue. His body was still. The most powerful religious figure in Western Christendom, the man who had crowned Emperor Frederick Barbarossa and placed England under interdict, had been defeated not by political rivals or assassins, but by an insignificant fly and his own infected throat. The doorframe assassin. On April 7, 1498, King Charles VIII of France moved through the Château d'Amboise, his royal residence in the Loire Valley. The 27-year-old monarch had just finished watching a tennis match in the castle grounds and was in good spirits. Charles had ruled France for 14 years, leading military campaigns into Italy and establishing French influence across Europe. He was known for his ambition and drive, despite his small stature and reportedly unattractive appearance. That afternoon, Charles was taking his queen, Anne of Brittany, to watch another game. The royal couple walked through the castle's winding corridors, Charles moving at his characteristically quick pace. As they approached a gallery connecting to the castle's outer buildings, Charles accelerated his steps. The passageway was ancient, built in an era when doorways were constructed for people of much shorter height. Charles entered the gallery at full stride. His attention was fixed on his destination, not on the path ahead. The stone doorframe loomed just 5 feet above the ground, far too low for a man walking upright. Before anyone could warn him, the king's forehead struck the solid stone lintel with devastating force. The impact immediately fractured his skull. Charles stumbled backward, his eyes wide with shock. Blood began to flow from the wound as he collapsed onto the stone floor. The king's body convulsed as his brain swelled against the broken bone. His breathing became irregular, each inhale more labored than the last. Courtiers rushed to his side. Physicians were summoned, but they could do nothing to stop the internal bleeding and swelling inside his skull. The king drifted in and out of consciousness for several hours. He could not speak, his eyes unable to focus on the faces around him. By evening, Charles VIII, King of France, conqueror of Naples, was dead, killed not in battle or by assassination, but by a simple doorway in his own castle. Road accident. In 1131, Prince Philip of France rode through the streets of Paris. The 15-year-old had been crowned co-king just 2 years earlier at his father's insistence. King Louis XVI adored his eldest son and heir, seeing in him the future of France. But many in the royal court had a different opinion. Chronicles from the time described the young prince as arrogant and impulsive, traits that would play a role in the events about to unfold. It was late afternoon when Philip and his small entourage entered the city suburbs. The prince rode ahead on his magnificent white stallion, a gift from his father. The streets were narrow and crowded, lined with wooden wooden buildings and filled with the usual chaos of medieval city life. Merchants shouted their wares, children played in the mud, and animals wandered freely between carts and passers-by. Near a dunghill, at the edge of a filthy alleyway, a large black pig suddenly darted into the road. The animal moved with surprising speed, its hooves clattering on the cobblestones. Philip's horse had no time to react. The stallion's front legs collided with the pig's body at full gallop. The impact was immediate and violent. The horse stumbled forward, its momentum throwing it off balance. Philip, caught unprepared, was launched from his saddle. His body hurtled through the air before striking a large stone at the roadside. The impact broke multiple ribs, driving bone fragments into his lungs. As Philip lay stunned, his panicked horse fell sideways, crashing down onto the prince's chest with its full weight. The force crushed his sternum and remaining ribs. Blood filled his punctured lungs as he gasped for air. His attendants rushed to pull the horse away, but the damage was catastrophic. Prince Philip, heir to the French throne, died there in the mud of a Paris street, his royal blood mixing with the filth of the road. The diabolical pig that had caused the accident had already disappeared back into the alley, leaving behind a kingdom in sudden crisis. Fell to his death. On March 1st, 1244, Gruffudd ap Llywelyn ap Iorwerth stood at the window of his cell in the White Tower. The Welsh prince had been imprisoned for months by King Henry III of England, held as a political hostage to ensure his father's compliance with English demands. Gruffudd was a proud man, known for his fierce temper and refusal to accept captivity. The stone walls of the tower had become unbearable to him, a constant reminder of his lost freedom. That night, after months of careful planning, Gruffudd was ready to attempt his escape. For weeks, he had been secretly tearing his bed sheets into strips and braiding them together to form a makeshift rope. The guards changed shifts at midnight, giving him a brief window when attention would be divided. The Welsh prince tied one end of his sheet rope to a beam near the window and tossed the other end out into the darkness. It dangled against the White Tower's exterior wall, stretching toward the ground 90 feet below. Gruffudd was a large man, heavily built from years of warfare. He squeezed through the narrow window opening and began his descent, gripping the fabric tightly. The night air was cold against his face as he lowered himself down the tower's stone face. He had descended about 15 feet when the strain became too much. The braided sheets, unable to support his considerable weight, began to fray. The rope snapped with a sickening tearing sound. For a fraction of a second, Gruffudd hung suspended in the air. Then gravity took hold. His body plummeted through the darkness, picking up speed with every foot of the fall. There was no time to cry out before he struck the ground head first. The impact shattered his skull and broke his neck instantaneously. His body contorted at an impossible angle. Guards heard the thud and rushed to find the prince's broken form sprawled at the tower's base, the torn sheets still clutched in his lifeless hands. Gruffudd's bid for freedom had ended in the most permanent captivity of all. Poisoned himself accidentally. In June 1277, Sultan Baybars sat in his opulent tent outside Damascus. The 55-year-old ruler had transformed the Mamluk Sultanate into the dominant power in the region through military brilliance and ruthless political maneuvering. Born a slave, he had risen to become the most feared leader in the Middle East, defeating both Crusader armies and Mongol invaders. Baybars was not a man who left matters of power to chance. That evening, he hosted a banquet for an Ayyubid prince who controlled territories Baybars coveted. The Sultan had spent weeks planning this meeting down to the smallest detail. As servants brought forth dishes of lamb, rice, and sweets, Baybars prepared to execute his scheme. He had secretly obtained a powerful poison, undetectable in food or drink. When the time seemed right, Baybars poured 2 goblets of kumis, a fermented mare's milk drink. With practiced sleight of hand, he added the poison to 1 cup, intending it for his guest. Before he could complete his plan, a messenger arrived with urgent news from Cairo. Baybars stepped away to speak with the man, leaving both goblets on the table. During his absence, a well-meaning servant noticed the cups were not full and topped them both off with fresh kumis. The diluted poison was now present in both drinks. When Baybars returned, he grabbed what he believed was his safe goblet and drank deeply. The slightly bitter taste didn't register as unusual until moments later. The first symptoms appeared within minutes. His throat began to burn, followed by violent stomach cramps that doubled him over. Sweat broke out across his forehead as he realized what had happened. The Sultan collapsed, his body convulsing as the poison attacked his nervous system. Vomit mixed with blood spilled from his mouth onto the ornate carpet. His own physicians tried desperately to induce vomiting to purge the poison, but it was too late. The man who had survived countless battles and assassination attempts died writhing in agony, killed by his own scheme. Killed by an arrow. On August 2nd, 1100, King William II of England rode through the dense undergrowth of the New Forest. The 44-year-old monarch, known as William Rufus for his ruddy complexion, was passionate about hunting. He had ruled England for 13 years after succeeding his father, William the Conqueror. That summer day, he led a small hunting party including his younger brother Henry and several nobles, among them Sir William Tyrrell, a skilled archer known for his marksmanship. The hunting party spread out through the forest, tracking a magnificent stag. The air was thick with anticipation as they closed in on their prey. William II positioned himself in a clearing, bow ready, waiting for the animal to emerge from the trees. Sir Tyrrell stood some distance away, his own bow drawn, eager to impress his king with a difficult shot. The stag burst from the undergrowth, its antlers cutting through low branches as it fled. Tyrrell released his arrow, a shot meant to bring down the animal from a considerable distance. The arrow flew true, but fate had other plans. The shaft struck a tree branch, then ricocheted off the stag's antlers, changing its deadly trajectory. The deflected arrow hurtled toward the king. Before anyone could shout a warning, the broadhead point struck William directly in the chest with tremendous force. The arrow penetrated his ribcage and pierced his heart. The king gasped, dropping his own bow as he looked down in disbelief at the shaft protruding from his body. Blood quickly soaked William's hunting tunic as he stumbled backward. He collapsed to his knees, then fell face first onto the forest floor. His companions rushed to his side, but the king was beyond help. The arrow had severed major blood vessels. With each weakening heartbeat, more blood filled his chest cavity. William II of England, son of the Conqueror, died within minutes, his blood seeping into the forest soil. His brother Henry, rather than staying with the body, rode immediately to Winchester to secure the royal treasury, ensuring his own swift succession to the throne, killed by his own revenge. In 892, Sigurd Eysteinsson rode across the northern highlands of Scotland. Known as Sigurd the Mighty, he was the second Norse Earl of Orkney and a feared Viking warrior who had conquered much of northern Scotland. His latest campaign had brought him face to face with his longtime rival, Mael Bricte the Bucktoothed, a Pictish chieftain who controlled neighboring territories. The two had arranged to meet for negotiations, each agreeing to bring only 40 men. But Sigurd, cunning and ruthless, had mounted 2 men on each horse to double his forces. When the parties met, Mael Bricte immediately recognized the deception. A battle ensued, short and brutal. Sigurd's superior numbers prevailed, and Mael Bricte fell under the Norse blades. For Sigurd, simple victory was not enough. He wanted to humiliate his enemy even in death. Taking his sword, the Earl severed Mael Bricte's head from his body with a single powerful stroke. The head, with its distinctive protruding tooth, would become Sigurd's trophy. He tied it to his saddle by its long hair, letting it hang as a warning to all who would oppose him. As Sigurd rode toward Orkney, the severed head bounced against his leg with each step of his horse. The prominent bucktooth that had given Mael Bricte his nickname scraped repeatedly against Sigurd's calf, creating a small cut. The Earl paid no attention to the minor wound, focusing instead on his triumphant return. Within days, the scratch became inflamed. The skin around it reddened and began to swell as infection set in. Bacteria from the dead man's mouth entered Sigurd's bloodstream. Fever followed, along with increasing pain. The leg turned hot to the touch, with red streaks extending upward toward his torso. Despite efforts by his healers, the infection spread rapidly. Sigurd's body burned with fever as the sepsis overtook him. Within a week of the battle, the mighty Earl lay delirious in his bed, his body poisoned by the very trophy he had claimed. Sigurd the Mighty died in agony, killed by the revenge of a dead man's tooth.
Shane McConkey. McConkey was a legend in extreme skiing and was attempting a ski-based jump from the Sas Pordoy Mountain on March 26, 2009. Red Bull sponsored him, and he was filming with Matchstick Productions when everything went wrong. The concept was simple in theory, but incredibly dangerous in execution. He would ski off a cliff, do a double backflip in the air, release his skis using special bindings, deploy a wingsuit, and then parachute to safety. He had done variations of this stunt successfully many times before. On that day, after launching off the cliff and completing his double backflip, one of his skis failed to release from his boot. The ski that remained attached created drag and threw him into a violent spin. He struggled to get the ski off while tumbling through the air. By the time he freed himself from the ski, he had lost too much altitude and was spinning too fast to deploy his parachute properly. He may have never even pulled his pilot chute. His friend JT Holmes, who was with him in Italy and reviewed the footage afterward, confirmed the combination of the stuck ski, the bad spin, and the altitude loss left McConkey with no options. Italian emergency responders arrived within minutes of the impact, but Shane was already dead at the scene. McConkey left behind a wife and a 3-year-old daughter. Red Bull later released a documentary about his life titled Shane McConkey, You Have One Life, Live It, which drew criticism for appearing to glorify the dangerous lifestyle that had killed him. Ueli Gegenschatz. He was a 38-year-old Swiss-based jumper who had made over 1,500 jumps in his career. He was considered one of the best in the world at wingsuit flying and was a founding member of the Red Bull acrobatics team. On November 11, 2009, he was performing a base jump for Red Bull from the Sunrise Tower in Zurich, Switzerland. The tower stood 90 meters tall, about 300 feet. For an experienced jumper like Gegenschatz, this should have been a routine jump. He had jumped from far more dangerous locations, including the Eiffel Tower and the Petronas Towers, but on this day, conditions were not ideal. As Gegenschatz jumped from the tower, a gust of wind hit him. The wind caught his parachute and blew him off course. He tried to regain control, but the wind was too strong. He was blown toward the building and struck it with his legs. The impact caused him to lose control completely, and his parachute became asymmetrical. He crashed to the ground with tremendous force. Witnesses said he remained conscious after hitting the ground and reportedly apologized for failing the jump. He was rushed to the hospital with severe internal injuries. For 2 days, doctors fought to save his life, but the damage was too extensive. Ueli Gegenschatz died on November 13, 2009. His death was the third Red Bull-sponsored athlete to die that year, after Shane McConkey and Eli Thompson. The incident sparked major controversy in Switzerland, with critics calling Red Bull's sponsorship of such dangerous activities an unbearable symbol of the cynicism and perversion of event marketing. The deaths raised questions about whether Red Bull was encouraging athletes to take increasingly dangerous risks to create spectacular content for marketing purposes. Toriano Wilson. Toriano Wilson was only 14 years old. He was from Bermuda and had been racing motorcycles since he was 12. In 2008, he was selected to participate in the Red Bull AMA US Rookies Cup, an elite program that identified young racing talent and provided them with coaching from legends like former 500 GP world champion Kevin Schwantz. Being chosen for this program was every young racer's dream. On August 17, 2008, Wilson was racing at Virginia International Raceway. It was the opening lap of a Sunday morning race. He qualified in 8th place and was holding his position when something went wrong. He crashed and fell from his bike onto the track. In racing, when you fall, the standard procedure is to try to move out of the way as quickly as possible. Wilson was attempting to get off the track when another rider, Luciano Ribodino from Argentina, came around the corner at racing speed. Ribodino had no time to react. He struck Wilson with his motorcycle. The collision was catastrophic. Wilson was airlifted to the University of North Carolina Medical Center in Chapel Hill for emergency treatment. Despite the doctor's efforts, he was pronounced dead early Monday morning, August 18th. He had suffered injuries too severe to survive. The other rider, Ribodino, was transported to Duke Medical Center with a broken left arm and broken left femur. He survived, but had to live with the knowledge that he had accidentally killed a fellow racer, even though the accident was unavoidable. The Wilson's death shook the racing community. He was the youngest person to die in a Red Bull event, and his family held his funeral at the Southside racetrack in Bermuda, where over 100 people came to pay their respects. His father rode Toriano's bike around the track one final time as mourners watched and wept. Eli Thompson. On August 28, 2009, 36-year-old Thompson was in Lauterbrunnen, Switzerland, working on a special wingsuit base, jumping shoot for a new 3D movie with the Red Bull Air Force. Lauterbrunnen is known for its spectacular cliffs and is a popular location for base jumpers, though it's also known for being extremely dangerous. Thompson was performing a wingsuit proximity flight, jumping from a helicopter. In wingsuit flying, jumpers wear special suits that create surface area, allowing them to glide through the air at high speeds. Proximity flying means flying very close to terrain features like cliffs and mountainsides, creating dramatic footage but leaving almost no margin for error. On this jump, Thompson was flying along the side of a mountain when he hit it. The impact was fatal. Whether it was a gust of wind, a miscalculation, or equipment failure, nobody knows for certain. What is known is that in wingsuit proximity flying, even the smallest mistake can be deadly because jumpers are traveling at over 100 miles per hour, just feet away from solid rock. Thompson's death was the second Red Bull athlete to die in 2009, coming just months before Ueli Gegenschatz would die in Zurich. Misha Leusch. Misha Leusch was a 33-year-old South African pilot from Durban who had been crowned Intermediate World Aerobatic Champion in 2014. He was a permanent member of the Red Bull Firestars stunt team and was considered one of the most talented aerobatic pilots in the world. On August 27, 2016, Leusch was performing at the First Silk Road International General Aviation Convention at Zhangye Ganzhou Airport in China's Gansu province. He was flying an Extreme Air XA-42, performing aerobatic maneuvers for the crowd. The routine involved a series of rolling descending maneuvers, the kind of spectacular flying that made air shows exciting. During one of these maneuvers, Leusch entered a dive. The plane should have pulled out of the dive and climbed back into the sky. Instead, it continued descending. Witnesses watched in horror as the plane spiraled out of control and crashed into the Gobi Desert about 100 meters from the runway. The impact killed Leusch instantly. Investigators later tried to determine what went wrong. Whether it was mechanical failure, pilot error, or some combination of factors remains unclear. What is certain is that airshow flying is significantly more dangerous than competitive aerobatics. In competition, pilots work within strict parameters designed for safety. At air shows, the emphasis is on entertainment, and pilots are more likely to push boundaries to thrill crowds. The Silver Falcons flew a missing man formation at the Bethlehem Air Show that same day in South Africa, a traditional aerial salute where the middle plane falls out of formation to honor a fallen pilot. Eigo Sato. Eigo Sato was 34 years old and one of the most respected freestyle motocross riders in the world. The Japanese rider had been the first from his country to land a backflip on a dirt bike and had finished third overall in the 2009 Red Bull X Fighters Tour. On February 28, 2013, Sato was training near his home in Iwaki City, Japan, preparing for the upcoming 2013 Red Bull X Fighters World Tour. He was working on backflips, one of the most dangerous tricks in freestyle motocross. The backflip requires perfect timing and execution. Launch off the ramp, rotate backward through the air, and land on the bike's wheels. Too little rotation and you land on your head, too much rotation and you flip over the handlebars. On this training run, Sato under-rotated his backflip. He didn't complete enough of the rotation and came down wrong. The crash was severe. He was transported to the hospital, but the injuries were too serious. Sato passed away from his injuries, leaving behind his wife and 2 young children. The FMX community was devastated. Fellow riders described Sato as one of the friendliest people they had ever met. He had been instrumental in promoting the X Fighters Tour coming to Japan for the first time, and he had dreamed of seeing that event happen in his home country. That event did happen in Osaka several months after his death, but Sato never got to see it. His fellow riders dedicated their performances to his memory. A memorial service in Tokyo drew over 500 people, each taking a flower to place at an altar in front of Sato's image and motorcycle. The FMX world had lost not just a great rider, but a genuinely good person who had made the sport better simply by being part of it. Did you enjoy this breakdown? Then please hit the bell button so you get notified when a new video is posted.
Uber's self-driving car fatality. On March 18, 2018, 49-year-old Elaine Hertzberg was walking her bicycle across a dimly lit street in Tempe, Arizona, when she entered the path of a self-driving Uber SUV being tested in autonomous mode. The streets were quiet and the car's sensors were responsible for detecting obstacles and reacting in real time. As Elaine crossed, the vehicle's perception system misclassified her multiple times, first as an unknown object, then a vehicle, then a bicycle, causing a critical delay in braking. The onboard emergency braking system was disabled during the test, relying instead on a human safety driver who was briefly distracted. In the seconds that followed, the AI struggled to correctly identify her path, and the car maintained speed toward her. By the time the system issued an internal warning, it was too late. Elaine was struck and died instantly. The incident shocked the world as the first pedestrian fatality caused by an autonomous vehicle and highlighted the dangerous limits of AI in uncontrolled real-world environments. Teen follows AI science experiment. On July 12, 2021, 17-year-old Samir Patel in Nottingham, UK, decided to experiment in his home kitchen, inspired by an AI-generated science experiment recipe shared online. The AI claimed the experiment was safe, promising fun chemical reactions that could be filmed for social media. Samir gathered household chemicals, some of which reacted violently when combined incorrectly. He followed the AI instructions step by step, unaware that a critical measurement error would produce toxic gases. As fumes filled the room, he attempted to ventilate the space, but the reaction escalated faster than he could respond. Neighbors reported a sudden smell and smoke shortly after, and emergency responders found Samir unconscious near the counter. He was rushed to the hospital but succumbed to chemical inhalation. This case went viral because it highlighted the risks of blindly trusting AI advice, especially for experiments involving reactive substances, and sparked global debate about liability and content moderation on AI platforms. Tesla autopilot crash. On March 23, 2018, 40-year-old Walter Huang was driving his Tesla Model X on Highway 101 in Mountain View, California, with autopilot engaged. Walter had used autopilot many times before and trusted the system to maintain speed and lane position. The highway included a left-hand curve with a concrete divider, which autopilot's sensors misinterpreted. The car drifted toward the barrier while Walter was distracted, believing the system would self-correct. As the vehicle approached, the AI failed to adjust its trajectory and no emergency intervention occurred. Walter attempted to steer manually at the last moment, but the impact was unavoidable. His Tesla collided with the concrete barrier at high speed and Walter died instantly. The crash raised significant questions about AI driver assistance systems and human overtrust, as the sensors misread complex road geometry and relied on driver oversight that proved inefficient. Autonomous crane miscalculation. On August 14, 2017, 45-year-old construction worker Leonard Fischer was on a job site in Hamburg, Germany, where an autonomous crane system was being tested to lift and position heavy steel beams. Leonard had years of experience with traditional cranes, but was observing the AI-powered system, which was designed to calculate lift weight, angle, and load distribution without human input. That day, the crane was assigned a new steel beam for installation, and Leonard was standing nearby to monitor the placement. The AI miscalculated the beam's center of gravity, slowly tilting it during the lift while Leonard attempted to retreat after noticing the irregular movement. The sensors did not detect his precise location as a hazard because he had stepped into an unregistered safety zone. Moments later, the beam tipped unexpectedly, crushing Leonard instantly against a support pillar. His death shocked the construction and AI communities alike, illustrating how even advanced automation can fail catastrophically when edge cases like human proximity and unexpected zones aren't accounted for. The incident became a case study in AI industrial safety protocols and human oversight requirements. Livestreamer asks AI for stunt ideas. On October 5, 2020, 22-year-old Liam Chen from Vancouver, Canada, sought inspiration for his livestream channel and asked an AI chatbot for exciting, shareable stunts. The AI generated suggestions that escalated in risk, including balancing on construction scaffolding and rooftop jumps. Liam chose one particularly dangerous stunt involving a 20-foot jump from a low building onto a concrete platform. He live-streamed the attempt to thousands of viewers, narrating each movement and encouraging engagement in real time. As he prepared, he misjudged distance and platform stability. Mid-jump, he slipped, landing awkwardly on the edge of the concrete, sustaining fatal injuries before emergency services could reach him. The event spread rapidly across social media, becoming an example of how AI-generated content suggestions can influence risky human behavior when boundaries between virtual guidance and real-world safety are ignored. Cruise robotaxi pedestrian drag incident. On May 7, 2019, 52-year-old Joshua Brown was walking along a street in San Francisco, California, when he came into the path of a Cruise robotaxi test vehicle operating in autonomous mode. The car's AI struggled to interpret pedestrian movement in a poorly lit intersection. Sensors initially failed to detect Joshua as a walking human and instead treated him as a moving obstacle with irregular patterns. The safety operator inside was monitoring, but the AI's misclassification delayed any braking response. The vehicle nudged forward while the pedestrian attempted to step out of the path, dragging him a short distance. By the time any evasive action occurred, it was too late. Joshua sustained fatal injuries from the dragging incident. The case became a cautionary example of AI misjudgment in real-world urban environments, highlighting how perception errors can escalate to deadly outcomes even with human supervision present. AI gym incident. On September 14, 2021, 28-year-old Miguel Torres from Austin, Texas, followed an AI-generated personal training program suggested by a fitness chatbot. The AI recommended attempting a personal best bench press using a new barbell technique it claimed was optimal for muscle growth. Miguel was alone in his home gym and lacked a spotter. Following the instructions precisely, he increased weight beyond his safe capacity. The AI emphasized repetition counts and lifting speed without context for human limits. Mid-lift, Miguel lost control of the barbell, which slipped onto his chest and neck. He was discovered by a family member moments later and rushed to the hospital, but the injuries proved fatal. The incident went viral, raising concerns about relying on AI for physical training advice and showing how automated guidance without context or human oversight can result in deadly consequences. The TikTok Train Challenge. On January 15, 2021, 19-year-old Riza Parestish attempted a dangerous TikTok trend near Lahore, Pakistan, where creators filmed themselves standing extremely close to speeding trains for dramatic slow-motion clips. Riza set his phone on a tripod beside the rails and stepped toward the track as an express train approached. Witnesses said he leaned in closer than others had, wanting the rushing wind to whip his clothes for effect. As he turned to deliver a short line to the camera, he misjudged how fast the final train carriage was moving. The rear section passed with intense force, and the air pressure alone pulled him slightly off balance. The carriage's metal edge struck his shoulder and knocked him violently off his feet, throwing him several meters across the gravel. The injuries were fatal on impact. When investigators reviewed the scene, they found the tripod positioned only inches outside the train's clearance zone, far too close for safety. His death became a stark example of how near-miss videos that look controlled online are often far more dangerous than viewers realize. The live-streamed urban climb in China. On November 8, 2017, 26-year-old Chinese rooftopper Wu Yongning attempted one of his most ambitious climbs yet, scaling the side of the Huayan International Center in Changsha without any safety harnesses. Wu had built a massive following on China's live streaming platforms by performing high-altitude stunts, pull-ups on ledges, hanging from crane arms, and doing acrobatics hundreds of meters above the ground. That day, he planned to film a dramatic finale for a competition that offered a large cash prize for the most impressive live-stream content. Wu reached the top floors of the tower but attempted to perform one final pull-up on the building's outer ledge. In the footage recovered later, he can be seen struggling to lift himself back onto the platform. His grip slips. For several seconds, he tries desperately to regain hold, but he loses strength and falls 62 stories. The video spread across China's social media, prompting government discussions about regulating extreme live streaming stunts. Wu's death became one of the most infamous examples of how online pressure and competition can push creators into lethal territory. The Ice Bucket Tragedy. In August 2014, the Ice Bucket Challenge was everywhere. Millions of people filming themselves dumping freezing water over their heads to raise awareness for ALS. But in Scotland, 40-year-old cameraman Cameron Lancaster attempted a dramatic twist on the trend by jumping feet first into a flooded quarry near Preston Hill. The idea was to film a high-impact, visually impressive version of the challenge for his friends and YouTube followers. Cameron leapt from a cliff edge into the deep water, but he misjudged both the height of the drop and the underwater terrain. The quarry had concealed rock formations and sudden depth changes, making it extremely dangerous for diving. Witnesses said he disappeared beneath the water immediately after hitting the surface. Emergency crews searched the quarry for hours before recovering his body. His death became one of the most widely reported fatalities associated with the viral Ice Bucket Challenge and served as a sobering example of how even charitable trends can turn deadly when people try to escalate their videos for more attention. The Facebook Live Seatbelt Dare. On April 22, 2017, 22-year-old Brooke Hughes and her friend Brianna Mitchell began live streaming on Facebook as they drove along Highway 80 in Mississippi late at night. The footage shows them laughing, singing, and casually joking about not wearing seatbelts, playing it up for the camera. Their car drifted slightly as Brooke kept adjusting the phone to frame both of them, unaware of the large transport truck approaching quickly from behind. The truck driver, traveling at full highway speed, only saw their slow-moving car at the last moment. The impact crushed the back end of the vehicle inward, shattering glass and sending the phone tumbling to the floor while still streaming. First responders later said the collision force was so extreme that the two women died instantly. Investigators determined that the girls never even processed what was happening. The distraction of performing for the live stream meant the approaching danger went unnoticed until the moment of impact. The tragedy became widely discussed because the live stream captured the casual buildup to a fatal crash that unfolded in seconds. The Russian rooftop plunge. On October 6, 2017, 17-year-old Russian student Oksana B. climbed to the roof of a 9-story building in Primorsky Krai to film a dramatic Instagram photo. Rooftopping had exploded on social media at the time, inspiring teenagers worldwide to take increasingly risky photos from ledges, cranes, and high-rise rooftops. Oksana had practiced climbing lower structures before, but never anything this tall. Witnesses later said she positioned herself on the very edge of the roof to capture a dramatic shot with her legs dangling over the drop. Moments later, a gust of wind swept across the building, a completely unpredictable shift common in the region. The wind hit her off-balance position at the exact wrong moment. She slipped, fell backward, and dropped the full 9 stories. Paramedics couldn't revive her. The case gained widespread attention across Russian media because it highlighted how the pursuit of thrilling Instagram photos was pushing young people toward dangerous, escalating behavior. The YouTuber cliff jump gone wrong. On July 7, 2018, 27-year-old travel creator Riker Gamble and his friends Aleski Lika and Megan Scraper visited Shannon Falls in British Columbia to film scenic shots for their adventure YouTube channel. They climbed to the upper pools, a restricted area known for slippery rock carved smooth by decades of fast-moving water. While filming slow-motion walking shots, Megan slipped and fell into the stream. The current immediately pulled her toward the waterfall's drop, and without hesitation, Riker and Alexei jumped in to try to save her. The water accelerated rapidly over the polished granite, making it impossible for any of them to regain their footing. Rescue teams later said the distance between the slip point and the edge of the falls leaves no recovery window. Once someone enters the current, they are swept over in seconds. All 3 were carried over the 100-foot drop and found downstream after a large-scale search involving helicopters and swift water teams. Their deaths shocked the creator community, showing how even highly experienced adventurers can underestimate natural hazards when focused on capturing dramatic footage.